My name is Lynne Larkin. I'm speaking in anticipation of the appearance of General Michael Hayden, who will be appearing at the Emerson Center on January 14th, 2017 for the Celebrated Speakers Series. And I am speaking on the topic, one that I hadn't necessarily ever thought I'd address, of use of torture in our intelligence work. As background, I did some work in the legal aspects of intelligence. I worked 10 years in the Central Intelligence Agency as an operations officer. The reason I wouldn't have expected to talk about torture is at the time I worked there, it was, as it is now, illegal. Number two, it is not something that was ever found to be morally substantiated. And three, it has always been found not to work. So for those three reasons, I am saying in my own words what my feelings are on General Hayden's take on use of torture in our work for intelligence or in the military. I've worked in the office where they oversee the application and regulation of the laws, and yes, there are laws that regulate intelligence work in America. And that includes, of course, laws made by Congress, executive orders, which are issued by the President of the United States, and until they are negated by the President. And then there are rules and regulations and policies. So there's several layers of policy restraints on the types of things one can do as an American gathering intelligence. They had decided where the boundaries were between the military and the CIA. And that sort of had gotten mushed during the Vietnamese War, when at times the presidents decided, and more than one did, that it was convenient to have the intelligence operations also handle military operations, which is the same thing that happened in 2001, when the military was reluctant, or certainly nobody in the military agencies or intelligence agencies knew anything about torture, because for 30, 40, 50 years, nobody had been doing it. And when they decided this was a good idea, unfortunately, they had to find some place to put that operation. And that operation ended up being in the most secret place they could put it, which would be, of course, the CIA. So they had renditions, they had secret operation prisons, and they used torture. And they had to hire psychological experts that were willing to design and create these programs, because nobody knew how to do that. We had information on other countries doing it. We certainly knew how, unfortunately, the Chinese or the Russians or people in the past had used torture. And they used courses actually in the CIA and the military to train people who are officers who might fall into hostile hands, in order to give them an idea of what other countries would be doing in the world of violence and torture. So to that extent, we know what happens, but it hasn't been practiced and shouldn't be, of course, for obvious reasons. My second point was that it's illegal, and it's been decided to be considered illegal by the American people. That's what democracy is about. And the Church Committee made the findings that these secret operations were not to occur, and that all of these activities were to be abolished. And so, I forget what year it was, but it was in the 70s, the President issued an executive order which made it very clear there was to be no torture, that if any American or any operative were to be aware that there was torture going on or that an assassination was happening, we had the duty as Americans to inform the other people, whether they're American or not, because we're against torture, we're against assassination. And suddenly, in 9/11, all that changed. So the decisions that had been made democratically and by the people of America were most certainly overridden by a few decisions in the executive branch. And I think that's illegal. Point number 3 was that basically, and quite extensively studied, it doesn't work. There is no question that, and for the reasons I stated, use of torture has been found, whether you agree with it or not to work. And you can make it available to anybody to service your needs, I guess, but indeed the idea is that if you torture somebody, they can give you any information to make the pain stop. And it's not necessarily going to be the truth, and that person may not even have the truth in your word, in your mind, and you may continue to torture that person. You may have an innocent person. The rendition program was continually found to have people taken without any sort of legal background or support and taken to these black sites for days, months, years, and they found to be innocent. I mean, this is not what America does. It is not, and it shouldn't change just because there's a crisis. No wishy-washy about it, no matter what anybody says, including General Hayden. It is indeed something that we should not be doing. I don't believe in a moving scale of morals or laws or any sort of give when we're under a crisis. And I think it's wrong for the American people to think that because it's a crisis, we should change our policies, our laws, or our morals. So I think that in addressing the major point of what General Hayden will be talking about with his book is that there should be no ifs, ands, or buts about what the American people stand for. If Congress has made a law, if the president has decided that this is morally abhorrent, and if the American people believe that the use of torture is bad for public relations and certainly bad for the people who would have to endure that and would be innocent, it is something that we should never consider. Thank you.